Okay, good afternoon and officially welcome everybody to the Communicating Strategically workshop. This is one of many workshops that you are going to be invited to as part of your 18-month trainee program. So it's a pleasure to see you all. I do want to remind you all the reason that we are doing this on Zoom, although we recognize that an in-person meeting is the ideal, and it's easier to be engaging when we are meeting in person. But because of space and time limitations and trying to make sure that we are getting these classes in for such a large group of trainees, we find it easier to do these sessions on Zoom, dividing the group of you that started this year in half. And we're doing 2 sessions, and we'll do the same for all of the other trainings that we have as well. So we do apologize for having to do this virtually as opposed to in person, but I will do my best to make it as engaging as possible for you all, and I hope you will do the same. I'm going to share my screen now, and I do ask that if you want to give reactions, or if you have questions and you want to raise your hand, you can use the reaction button at the bottom of the screen, or you can just chime in, okay? We do want to hear from you. So I'm going to share my screen now. And
you can see it, Robin?
you see, yeah, it's the same thing that happened before, even though I'm sharing the right screen. It's showing up on the other monitor. Okay. So let's get started. I do have one request of you, and that's before we begin. I'm going to ask you for 3 things. One, to see your face, which we are happy to see, as you can see in the slide. We want you to actively participate as much as you can. And if you can, try not to multitask, right? If we were in person, you'd be focused on the training. So that's what I hope we can get you to do this afternoon. Okay. The objectives for this afternoon are to identify communication barriers and how to overcome them. You're going to learn how to create a communication action plan. We'll review the Rate Your Listening Ability assessment that was sent to you on Monday. And if you need to learn how to enhance your listening skills, we'll talk more about that. And then we'll review ways to actively participate in meetings. May I ask if everybody did receive the listening activity assessment that looks like this, and also the participant guide that looks like this? It was included in an email reminder that I sent to everyone on Monday. Okay, so hopefully you have that, because the participant guide includes the slides, and the listening activity we'll talk a little bit about later. Okay, back up. When you think about communicating strategically, what does that mean to you? And then I will show you, as you can see, the definition that I have, but I do want to hear from you. When you think about communicating strategically, what comes to mind? And there's no wrong answer, it's just what you think. Kevin, it looks like you wanted to say something. I saw your picture on it. You look like you were ready to speak. Kevin
Um,
Cream.
I would say it means like communicating in a way where you're getting, I mean, I guess not necessarily like the exact answer what you want, but the communication you're having is geared towards like a purpose, I guess.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Thank you. And Joe, you have your hand raised? The floor is yours, or did you change your mind? Okay, it looks like you changed your mind. No pressure. Okay, communicating strategically, as I have it defined here, is communicating the best message through the correct channels to the right people at the right time. Okay, and I hope that that makes sense to you all, and we'll talk about how to do that over the next 2.5 hours. There are various forms of communication. We communicate verbally, we communicate non-verbally, and we'll talk a lot about that this afternoon, in writing, visually, and also in terms of giving people feedback. With verbal communication, you're going to use words to convey a message, obviously, right? And in doing so verbally, you can either do so in person, via phone, or virtually. Just like to check in with you to find out, of the three, which is the most challenging for you, communicating in person, via phone, or virtually?
Hello.
Checking in to see. Go ahead, please speak.
Via phone, you mean like with my voice or via text?
Voice. Well,
Oh,
and you can include
yeah.
text too, but
I
either one.
mean, yeah, in my opinion, it's communication is more complete when someone can see your facial expressions and everything, body
Yes,
language, whatever.
absolutely. So whether it be via phone, a phone call the traditional way, or via text, that is a challenge because you can't see the person's facial expressions. And since you bring up text, Alexandra, um, I know it often, and this happens with people in their personal lives, messages can be misconstrued, right? When communicating via text, particularly since we often use shorthand when we're communicating via text and typing quickly. So sometimes the message can be misinterpreted. Do you find that to be the case? And is that why you asked for that distinction?
Yeah, so, somewhat.
Yes. And for me, I know via phone or virtually is a bit of a challenge for the reason that Alex said. I like to see people's facial expressions and body language. So I know that they are with me in understanding or agreeing with what I'm saying. With nonverbals, there are a variety of ways, right, to communicate through gestures. It could be hand gestures, your body language. What does leaning forward communicate to you? Anybody? When you see somebody's body language that they're leaning forward when you're talking to them, what does that convey to you?
Interest,
Interest, right?
attention.
Absolutely, absolutely. That's important. And if somebody is sitting back with their arms folded, what message does that tend to convey?
Disinterest, a lack of attention.
Right, just the opposite. It could be that they're cold, but usually the message that's sent, particularly if the facial expression shows disinterest, sitting back with your arms folded sends that other message. And when you are communicating in writing through email, letters, reports, articles, memos, texts, posters, and flyers, that's another form of communication. And Alex brought up text messages. One question that I want to ask, because for a number of you, this is your first full-time work experience in a corporate environment like this. Are you finding the transition from communicating via text, as we said earlier, quickly, without really proofreading what you're saying, shorthand? Do you find that transitioning from only communicating that way to now having to write emails where, it's longer messages, you have to proofread what you say? Do you find that to be a bit of a challenge, or did you make that transition easily? Just remind you all, we want this to be a two-way conversation. So if I'm asking a question, it really is a question, for you, not rhetorical.
For me, I would say it wasn't too much challenging. It was just more like you're putting more attention into what you're writing and making sure that what you're saying is coming off correctly.
Yes, absolutely. Because that's important, right? When you're communicating at work versus when you're communicating a text message with a friend or family member, you really have to pay attention to it. Okay, good. But I'm glad it hasn't been a challenge, just something to pay attention to, right? Hey, another form of communication is giving people feedback. So you may find yourself having to give people feedback now and probably even more so in the future when you become managers, because right in less than 18 months, you will be managers here at the MTA. And when you're giving people feedback, and you can even practice this in your personal life now or with your colleagues now, you want to be specific, right? Oh, I see somebody's coming in. You want to be specific about what you are communicating to the person when you're giving them the feedback. You want it to be timely, right? As soon as the thing that you're giving them the feedback on happened. You want to focus on the behavior, not the person. A lot of this you probably already know. If people can change their behavior, they can't change who they are. So you're going to focus on the behavior and share the impact of that behavior, right? If there's a reason why you are telling somebody that they need to do something differently, it could be because their behavior had a negative impact. Or the opposite could be true. If you're giving somebody positive feedback because they did something really well, it's because it had a positive impact and you want them to understand why. The last thing is to discuss some alternative positive behavior if you are giving the person constructive feedback. What are your thoughts on what you see on this slide? Does anything stand out for you? Okay, are we ready to move on? Let's keep it moving then. I'm going to ask you a poll question. It's actually 3 questions in succession. It's an anonymous poll. What I'm going to do is pull it up now, and you will see the questions that you can respond to. I will be able to see as people are responding to the poll. And once everybody has responded, I'll share the results and we can see what your colleagues have to say. Okay, close to half of you responded already. Okay, and I see everybody figured out. If you scroll down, you can see the remainder of the second question and the third question. Okay, we've got 93%. I will end the poll just to keep us moving and share the results. So with the first question, when communicating with others, 44% of you say that you maintain eye contact, which is very good. No one said that you look around the room a good deal of the time, which is excellent. And then 56% of you said that you do what most people do, right? You try to maintain eye contact, but you look around from time to time. I think that's natural, right? That's what most people do. And I think that's good. It feels awkward if you're staring at somebody 100% of the time, but if you can do that, that's that's fantastic. When a colleague is explaining a problem, To me, 63% of you said you listen carefully for the main idea so you can find a solution. 26% of you say you try to understand and emphasize how they are feeling. And then 12% of you said that you look for the specific facts pertaining to the situation. And I think that's very good also, because if you look for the specific facts, that can help you to help the person find a solution. So I think everything that you all are doing is spot on. Question number 3, when I want to get my point across to colleagues, 56% of you said explain the thinking and logic behind what you were saying. I tend to do that, and hopefully when doing so, I'm not coming across as defensive, but helping, the person that I'm speaking to understand my thought process. 5% of you, or 2 people, say that you try to persuade them without being too forceful. That's good too, as long as you're not being too forceful, right, when you're doing so. And then 40% of you say that you listen to their point of view first and then express your ideas gently. I think all of that is a fair approach to take. Now I'm going to stop sharing and ask you all, when people are communicating with you, what would you like to see in these 3 areas? Do you want people to maintain eye contact the full time, or is that uncomfortable for you, or is that your preference?
I think
think
it
so.
becomes
Okay.
difficult to keep that up for whole conversation. So my preference might be number 3.
Right.
Person.
Thank you, Dan. And that's natural, right? As long as the person is giving you their attention most of the time, and even if they're looking away, it's just to avoid, staring you down like that. As long as you know that's what they're doing, but they are maintaining eye contact, I think it feels like you're being paid attention to. Right? Okay. How about for number 2, when somebody's explaining a problem, if you're explaining a problem to somebody, what's your preference for how they respond to you?
I would want someone to understand how I'm feeling as opposed to giving me a solution. I feel like if if there's just a lot of emotions going on right now in me, I do not want to hear a solution. I just need you to let me rant about it
Okay.
first.
Okay, good. And I think that is the way a lot of people feel. But do you find that it's helpful if you tell the person, you know what, at this point, I just want you to listen to me?
Yeah, I mean, me personally, I'm just very sure to be like, don't respond, just listen, you know?
Okay, good.
So yeah.
Okay. And part of the communication process is to make sure that you're getting what you need from that other person, is for you to say just that. Because I think most people will feel the need to want to listen to solve your problem. But if that's not what you want, if you communicate that, then you get what you want from the person. And it's also, good for the person to ask too before they offer a solution, if you would like, if they would like you to, if you would like them rather to help you solve it, or just listen. I think it works both ways. Liz, you were raising your hand.
Yeah, I'm chuckling because I have two daughters, 2 adult daughters, and they call home at times. And I have learned over time, I wasn't perfect, it didn't start out this way, but I have learned over time to say, okay, hold on. Are you calling me now because you want me to give any advice, or because you just want me to listen to you? And oftentimes it's, I just need somebody to talk to. I just want you to listen. And it's like, okay, then I know I can kind of sit back and just really listen, take it in without giving any advice. So that's another approach to just checking in with people. What do you need from me right now? And then
Exactly.
they'll tell you.
Good. Thank you. Yes. So that's confirmation, right? That it works both ways, right? On the part of the listener and the person speaking. And then when you want to get your point across to, or when your colleagues want to get their point across to you, what's your preference and how they communicate with you when you think about the three things there. Would think that you would want them to listen to your point of view, right? Anybody have any thoughts on that? May?
I can try, like, people think differently, so everybody has their own opinion and thoughts. So if you have some kind of point, somebody else may have different point, but you can definitely come together and talk it out and come to an agreement in between what your points are and go with whichever makes more sense.
Okay, good, good. Again, got to work two ways, right? All right, thank you for that. Okay, when you look at this picture, picked it for a reason because I want to ask you this question. What can you do to ensure your messages are interpreted and understood as intended, unlike the person in this picture?
You can like check in with people as you're trying to make your point. Like,
Absolutely.
do you understand what I'm saying right now? Like, is there any confusion here?
Yes. Absolutely. Thank you, Joe.
You can try to explain it in simple terms that anybody could understand as well.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, Joshua. And what, go ahead, MD.
I was going to say, you can, in between of your discussion, you can definitely ask them some questions to see if they're engaged or make them engage in your conversation. So if they understand better, or if they have any question, they don't understand something, they can definitely ask the question and clarify themselves.
Absolutely. Thank you all for that. Now, if you were this guy, right, in this picture, what would tell you that you need to do all of the things that you just mentioned?
The blank stares and the open mouths.
Exactly, right? He may not see the question marks above their head, but their faces are clearly saying, right, that I'm not following you for whatever reason. The one thing I would say, in addition to everything that you all said, was read the room, right? Pay attention to the body language and the facial expressions of the people that you are talking to. You know, as was said before, use simple language, ask questions, you know, to make sure that they are following you. But I think if you know, pay attention to the nonverbals that you're getting, you'll know when you need to do things differently or ask questions or what have you, to make sure that you haven't lost the people that you're talking to. Okay. There are potential for a number of communication barriers if you don't communicate strategically, right? There are language barriers that can impede effective communication, using jargon or unfamiliar terms. I know what happens a lot here at the MTA and other organizations as well. We use acronyms and jargon and assume that everybody that we're talking to is familiar with those things. So the one thing I would just remind you of is, if you're talking to people, particularly folks that are not in your department or your area, you know, of expertise, make sure you are explaining terms of jargon. You know, if you're talking to them about something for the first time. Also, there are multi-generational differences that can impede effective communication. I'm going to ask you, how many generations do you think exist in the workforce today? And all of them may be here at the MTA. Take a guess.
I think it's 5.
Yep. Who said that? Evan?
Yep.
Evan, you're exactly right. For extra credit or bonus points, do you want to say what they are, or at least whatever ones you can remember?
Yeah, I'm gonna have to pass on that one.
No, that's
I don't
okay.
think I
That's
know all
okay.
of them.
Well, if you think about your generation, that's one. If you know what your generation is, do you know? I'm not going to ask you your age, but if you
I
happen to
don't
know
think
your generation.
I don't think I'm a millennial. I think I'm
Gen Z.
Gen Z.
Gen Z. Okay, thank you, Michael. All right, so Michael, you want to chime in? You know one. Do you know any of the others?
Sure. Gen Z, millennial generation, Generation X, baby boomers, greatest generation, and the silent generation.
Okay, very good. Excellent. Excellent. So I know of the ones that I have here on my list are the traditional list. I'm going to go from the oldest to the youngest that were born from between 1927 and 1946. The baby boomers, 1947 to 1964. Generation X, 1965 to 1980. Millennials, 1981 to 2000. Generation Z, 2001 to 2020. Is the silent generation the ones that were recently born, Michael?
Oh no, those were the ones born during the Depression.
Okay. Okay, got it. Thank you. See, I forgot about that. They're not in the workforce right now, according to the information that we have. The from the traditional list through Gen Z are the ones that are actually in the workforce. Why is it important to understand how that can provide or present a language barrier? Michael or anyone can answer that question. And think about your experience so far in working.
Because different generations have different experiences, especially with respect to technology.
Right, and how the preferences for using technology, right, or not. Also jargon, right?
And overall
can be
business
different.
practices have changed, I'm sure.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. So I think all generations owe it to each other, right? To kind of understand how the other generation operates. You know, even though you are newer to the work environment than say baby boomers, I wouldn't say that, you have to adjust to the way baby boomers do things, and baby boomers don't have to adjust to the way Gen Z. I think, there's got to be some compromise and a meeting of the minds and communicating with one another what your preferences are. Since you've been here, have you noticed any communication barriers between yourself and your colleagues who might be in other generations? And if so, how do you work around that? Gisa, I'll ask you. Gisa, you with us?
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Can you please
Okay.
repeat the question, please?
Sure. Have you had any experience with some barriers between communication with people in other generations here in the workforce? And if so, how do you work around that?
I don't think I had big problems or big difficulty working around it. It's just the fact that trying to understand both sides and coming up or coming to a common ground. And it's just a matter of communication and how you communicate.
So we went ahead and made that correction. So
Gotcha.
by the end of the day, that should be populated.
Okay, thank you.
Usually,
Thank you. Yeah, seems like something's going on in the background there, so I won't keep you. Okay. As far as cultural,
Robin, you have
yes.
MD with his hand up.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Liz. Yes,
No
MD.
One
Sorry
thing
about
I noticed, that's so important. One thing that I noticed is that many of my colleagues like to print out what they are to work on, but I like to keep them on file and read it off my computer rather than having me printing it out and just reading it off of that. So I don't know if that kind of makes a direction difference, but I noticed
Yes.
that to my older colleagues.
Yes, it does. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Yes, it's not only differences in communication, but work styles, right? And how people prefer to do things. Yes, and that can be a difference that you have to deal with as well. So thank you for sharing that. Okay, in addition to language barriers, there are cultural barriers, right? You know, we're fortunate to work, you know, in a place where you've got people from various cultures with, you know, different languages, and different cultures may use different words to communicate the same message, or different gestures. So understanding those differences is important. um, you know, people have different levels of and different types of education and you know, life experiences that they bring into the workforce, and just diversity in general, which is a good thing, right? But if we are not mindful to you know, make sure we're taking all of those positive things into consideration, it can present a barrier. Any thoughts or comments on that? Just I said I want this to be interactive, so I don't want to move forward with anything if people have something to say. Yes, Sylvia, thank you.
Add something in this. It's not also cultural, but also condition, like for example, autism. People with autism.
Oh, I am so sorry. We can hear you, but your audio is a little muffled.
Robin, I think I heard people with accents.
Okay. Is that what you said, Sylvia? Thank you, Liz.
No, but for autism condition, this condition, people with autism doesn't make eye contact. Also have different body language.
Okay, people from different cultures have different body languages.
Autism.
And customs.
No, autism.
Yeah, I'm sorry. And if you said something about accents, I can tell you it's not your accent that's getting in the way. It's the sound is muffled.
I think
I'm
she's
not sure if
saying
you had customs. Go ahead, Elton.
She's talking about autism. Yeah, autism. So
autism?
People that struggle with communication.
Okay. Thank you, because I couldn't even hear that. I'm glad you heard that, Elton. Thank you. Yes, absolutely. And that's something that you know, we have to recognize and pay attention to as well, and be sensitive to, right? So thank you. And I hope Elton heard you correctly, Sylvia.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And I hope your sound comes through clearer next time, because it almost sounds like an echo or something. So thank you both. Okay, physical barriers, right? Working in different locations, you know, kind of like we're doing now, where, you know, you have to then communicate virtually as opposed to in person, which is the ideal. That can provide a barrier. Social distancing, not so much of an issue now. Hopefully, you know, that COVID is trying to come back with a vengeance. That won't be something that we'll have to worry about anymore. And then you know, recognizing different body language. And you know, I thought I heard Sylvia saying that in different cultures, body language, gestures can mean different things, right? Or in some cultures, you know, making direct eye contact is not something that's encouraged all the time. We're here in the United States. We may be encouraging people to make eye contact, and understanding, you know, those differences is important as well. Okay. And then other barriers that can get in the way, and this is something that we definitely have control over, is making sure that we're not overloading people with information, right? Which can very easily happen. You know, there's a lot, you know, that information that we're taking in, and a lot of information that we have to convey, but information overload can cause problem as well. What are your thoughts on that? You know, if what are your thoughts on that? Is information overload a problem for you? Or the more the better?
I can answer that. So For me, my manager and I, during the past few weeks, we had lots of meetings, right?
Okay.
We usually discuss the meeting before we schedule the meeting, and then we hold a meeting for about 30 minutes. And then after the meeting, he would type a script and an email that to me, and that will be the script of everything that we discussed that day.
Oh,
So,
okay.
Yeah, so the email kind of reinforced the conversation that we had, which is really helpful because let's say we had a conversation on Friday, right? And then I had to, there's a whole weekend ahead of us, right? And then on Monday, I need to get back and do the work, but I forgot about little specific details.
Right.
That email, that script that he sent me reinforces and reminds me of what happened on Friday. Yeah.
Very good. Very good. So in this particular case, it's not information overload. It's actually a helpful reinforcement, right, of the information that was communicated in the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. And there are different communication channels like Elton just described. You can communicate in person, you can communicate virtually, and then you can follow up with an email. But you know, in the lack of varying communication channels could present a barrier if somebody wants to be communicated one way and then their manager communicates with them through a different channel. So this is why that can be a barrier. The organizational structure can, you know, present barriers as well as if you've got layers in between the layers that should be talking to one another and the layers in between are not conveying messages, that can create a barrier. And then gender, you know, talking about the fact that sometimes, you know, people of different genders can communicate differently, right, in terms of how they take in information and communicate information. Any comments or thoughts on this slide that hasn't been communicated yet? Okay, so you're ready to keep it moving, I take it, because I'm not hearing otherwise, so we'll go into the next one. So we talked about the fact that there are opportunities for communication barriers to exist. But, you know, if you are in a relationship with somebody and you know you've got to communicate with them, you want to do whatever you can to minimize those communication barriers. What are some of the things that you do to minimize those barriers? It could be things that we've talked about already or things that we didn't yet.
Maybe don't assume that people can read your mind in a sense. Like make sure that you're explaining your thoughts clearly and not using shortcuts that might make sense to you, but probably don't make sense to other people.
Absolutely. Thank you, Dan. Very well said. Appreciate that. What else? I have some ideas that I'll pull up on the screen, but I want to hear from you first. May, you look like you're dying. Oh, wait, hold on. Alex was going to say something, and then I'll come to you, May, because you look like you were going to say something, but Alex raised his hand first. Go ahead, Alex.
Oh, yeah, I was gonna say that it helps when you keep the communication constant, you know, like on the regular, kind of like scheduled, because if you leave it for a while, then there's a lot of things that you might forget or you might bury under the carpet or whatever, you know, so it's very good to like keep an update.
Absolutely. No, I appreciate that. That is a good point that I actually do not have on my screen, but we should add that because I think that's important. Okay, thank you. And May, I was going to come to you because you just look like you wanted to say something.
Oh, just like going back on how you could just ask them like, oh, did you understand what I said? Or like, can you like, do you have any clarifying questions to know that you got your point across?
Absolutely. Excellent. Thank you. Thank you for that. Okay, who else looks like they want to say something? Even though I can't see you, I'm just assuming that you want to speak. Jimmy Lee.
Robin, you have two hands up. Just so
Okay.
you know, you have Bryson Ellington and then Elton.
Elton.
Dang.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. You know what? Just so you know what I'm doing, I can see, I think, up to 10 people at a time, and then I've got an arrow over. And, you know, when I wasn't seeing people on the first screen, I was arrowing over. So I'm sorry, Bryson, I missed you when you raised your hand. Please, you have the floor. Or did you change your mind?
No. Can you guys hear me?
Yes, yes, we can.
Okay. I was just going to say that I think everyone has different communication barriers and styles. So it's about finding middle ground and catering to people's styles, but also recognizing your own communication styles, that you have your own distinct ways of communicating and receiving communication. So I think it's just important to acknowledge that between two parties and trying to effectively communicate with each other.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much. And making sure that that's known, right? If you have a preference for how people communicate with you, and it seems like they're not doing that, you know, letting them know, right? Is that something that you do, Bryson?
Yeah, and currently struggling with.
Okay. Okay. What's the struggle that we can talk about? That
No,
maybe we
just
can
like
help you.
kind of like identifying how people communicate and trying to, like I said, cater to that.
Okay.
And also recognizing.
Have you asked, you know, what people's
Yes.
preferences? Okay.
And I think someone made a point about like consistently trying to actively talk and communicate with that person. So that definitely, again, helps.
Okay, good. And hopefully that'll become clearer with time, right? No, I appreciate that. Thank you. Elton, you had your hand raised. You wanted to say something?
Yes. So I would say use clear and concise languages, or languages, such as like speak or write in a straightforward and easily understandable manner.
Yes.
And I guess as well as like use visual aids as well, because visual aids can help clarify complex information. And after all that, be patient with the individual, right? Be patient with yourself and others when trying to overcome communication barriers.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. You all are bringing up some wonderful things. I don't have all of that on the slide, which you'll see in a moment, but you're
Robin?
bringing up great points. I see Dan Rubin.
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, thank you. Dan?
Just to add on to what Bryson and Elton were saying, I think it can be important to know your audience. Some people are very direct, where others are, you know, happy to ask how your day was, and kind of knowing who you're communicating with, I think, and their style is important to minimize these barriers.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Another great point. Some people get to the point, don't know socializing, right? Go ahead, Liz.
No, I was, Daniel, thank you for making that point. I had an experience recently where I met with somebody senior to me. And I think that my impression was that he, you know, doesn't have a lot of time. So I get the impression like, you know, be quick, be brief, get to the point. And I didn't make any kind of, well, we said good morning and, you know, that type of thing, but he wanted to chat a little bit. And I was getting right into, and he had to say to me, oh, wait, hold off a little bit. And it was a little bit like I felt like I should have done that at this point in my career. But you know what? You make that mistake sometimes. So I think to your point, really knowing your audience, now I know this is a gentleman who likes to chat a little bit before jumping into the business. And I will make sure that I keep that in the back of my head. But you made me think of that, Daniel, when you brought up your example. So thank you for that.
No, great example. I mean, what I like about what you just shared, Liz, was you can't assume that just because the person is at a certain level that they might not want that, or make an assumption that because they are at a level that they want that, right? Because your peer may be the one that wants you to get right into the business because they don't have time for socializing. So excellent points, everyone. So I'm just going to share what I have here. Use simple language, as was said. Maintain eye contact. Avoid information overload. A lot of this is just reiterating what we talked about before. Be an engaged listener, and we'll talk more about listening later on in the session. Know your audience and pay attention to nonverbals and all of the other things that your colleagues just said, because they were really good points. Again, hopefully, if you do all of these things, it will minimize, you know, any potential communication barriers. What I'm going to do now is move you into breakout rooms. So Zoom's breakout rooms are the equivalent of small table group discussions if we were in a a conference room or a training room together, and I asked you to break up into small groups to have this discussion. What's going to happen is once I open the rooms, I'll open up about 10 rooms, so we'll have no more than 5 people in a room. You're going to receive a message on the screen asking you to join the room. So just accept that and you can go into the breakout room to discuss either of the following: a time when you felt very good about how you communicated with other people. What did you do well in presenting the information, and how did the audience respond to you? So that's one option. Or you can choose to talk about a time where you didn't feel as good as you would hope when you communicated with somebody. Same questions. What could you have done? How did the audience respond? And what could you have done differently? When we come back to the room, what I will do is just ask you all to share what stood out from the discussions that you had. When I'm going to ask for everybody to share their story, but as many people as possible can get through to share their responses to these questions in about 10 to 15 minutes. That would be great.
Robin, might I
Yes.
add?
Sure.
Just a couple of things. When you go into your breakout rooms, again, if you don't have your camera turned on now, if you could turn it on in your breakout rooms, that would be really great. Secondly, Robin and I both tend to jump in and out of your meetings into your breakout rooms just to make sure you don't have questions. So if you see us and you have a question, please ask. If you see us and you're doing just fine, you can ignore us. We'll kind of hang out to kind of gauge, and then we'll get out of your way. All right. So
And
thank you
at
for
this
that.
moment, and at this moment, I may have to take advantage of the break and step away for a moment while they're in the breakout room. So Liz, I will ask you if you could pop in.
Sure. I'll be popping into all of them then.
Okay, so I am going to open up the breakout rooms now and we'll close them. It's about 1:57. At about 2:10, I'll check in and see if we're ready to come back as a full group. So okay, come on. I don't know what's happening here. Okay, there we go. Rooms, I'm going to open 10 and they'll assign you randomly. Okay. So I'm creating the rooms and I'm opening up now. So you should see the message to join.
Okay.
Yep. And I'm going to stop sharing.
Okay. I'm checking to just make sure that everyone is joined. Charlie Gordillo is just joined. Okay.
Okay. And Liz, I am sorry. This
Go
is
ahead.
good timing. I need to make a pit stop.
Go do what you need to do.
And I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay. Camille.
Welcome back, everyone. Okay, between Liz and I, we popped into each of the rooms and it looked like you were having some discussions, which is good. Again, we're not going to ask you to share all of your stories, but we do want to hear what stood out. What were examples of some things where the people said they felt really good about how they communicated and how the audience responded. Don't be shy. Anyone, go ahead, Elton.
So I had a person said that how well they communicated based on like a discussion where they handed out pamphlets for people, right? Basically, it outlines basically an initial outline of what they're going to talk about and what all the topics and subtopics, and it helps the audience to read through it and know exactly where the conversation is at, and help them to take notes as well.
Excellent, excellent. Who did that so we can give them some kudos?
Oh, I did.
You did very good.
Yeah.
Robin,
excellent.
could I say one quick thing?
Sure.
Elton, that's usually called an agenda.
Yes.
And just so you know, at any meeting that you go into, if you're leading that meeting, having an agenda that you can give out to people in advance can really help them focus so they have some idea of what they're coming in for. If you can give them a purpose even, what topics are going to be covered. It can be really helpful to keep people focused, including yourself. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks, Joe. I see your hand is raised.
Yeah. So one of the ones that came up with us was just like how different strategically communicating depends on like even just your audience size, right? Whereas like if you have a one-on-one, right, you have like a different expectation of engagement with that person, right? Versus if you're like on a panel or like interacting with a panel, right? There's a little bit more dispersed. And then if you're like talking to a group of 40 people, right? It's like, how do you engage with that strategically, right? You're having to like kind of give the room your attention and like have people need to like raise their hands if they're going to engage back with you, you know? So
Exactly. Exactly. Kind of like what we're doing right now,
yeah,
right?
exactly like what we're doing right now. You know?
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. Anything else that stood out as either good communication or communication that you were like, oh, I want to do over for that one? Did anybody share any of those stories?
I didn't really have I didn't have like one specific story, but I know my biggest flaw when communicating to people with people is that I'm very like monotonous and I don't really show like body language like that. So it really like I feel like the person in front of me just automatically assumes I'm not interested when in reality I'm just not an expressive person like physically, you know?
Okay.
So that was something that I pointed out about me that I think is a really big flaw.
Oh, okay. All right. I appreciate the honesty. Well, Muram, I'm not sure if you cannot show your face on screen, because I would be able to say if you know
I'm trying to.
if I'm not seeing that, but I can tell you in your voice, I'm not hearing anything in your voice that makes me feel that you're not interested. So even if your body language, if you are not somebody who is expressive visually, if you make sure that your voice, does convey, a level of interest and attentiveness, which in just hearing your voice, it sounds like it does. And the fact that you're even speaking up tells me that you're attentive. Yes, Liz is looking to say something to you as well.
Thank you, Robin. Muram, I would just ask you, having said what you just said, is there one thing that you think you could do that is maybe not quite as uncomfortable for you as it may be to be expressive? Is there one thing you think you could do that might help you feel that you are communicating more effectively through body language or whatever it is?
I try to smile. That's
Okay,
it.
okay.
Like really.
Okay.
And
Okay.
I feel like when I smile as I'm talking, then they'll understand that like, okay, yeah, I am interested. But anything more than that, it becomes a lot, to
Okay.
be
It's
honest.
not authentic for you.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
And you
that's
definitely
really
wanna
good self-awareness, Muram. And the smiling is a really big one. That really does show somebody that you are communicating in some way back.
Thank you.
And it also comes through in your voice, because just even like I said, I'm not seeing you, but hearing you sound pretty positive and upbeat to me. And it could be that you're smiling as you're talking to the group. Would anybody else echo that? You can give a thumbs up if you're hearing the same thing that I'm hearing. I see, yes, some people are shaking their heads, giving you thumbs up. So, I hope that helps you, Muram, to understand that yes, while your authentic self may not be, really expressive with your hands, your smile and your tone of voice is conveying a positive message. So I hope
Thank you.
I hope you're receiving that from the group.
I am.
And thank you for sharing that. Okay. Let me just ask, if you yourself didn't have a situation where you were not happy with how you communicated, was there a time when you were not happy with how somebody communicated to you? And what? Mhm.
I want to say, I mean, obviously, I feel like we all have had like bad moments with people, or like we felt like someone was just being too negative. But at the same time, because I know how I am, sometimes I'm just like, oh, like maybe they're the same, if that makes sense.
Okay, that they're not expressive.
Yeah,
Okay, gotcha.
because that would make sense to me.
Yes, and it's good to give people the benefit of the doubt, right? And not make an assumption if they're not, because they're different, the way they communicate is different from you, that it's not good. Okay,
Yeah, yeah, basically.
okay, wonderful. And I appreciate that. I appreciate that. And if there's ever a time where somebody is not communicating with you in a positive way, you can almost learn from that person what not to do. If you know what it feels like to not be communicated with positively, you now know what not to do. Or if you see somebody does a really good job of communicating effectively, you might learn something from them, you know, that if maybe you're not doing that you can do, as long as it's authentic, right, to you. Okay, I am going to share my screen again, and hopefully it comes up correctly this time, because for some reason when I shared the screen before, I wasn't seeing it the way I thought I would on the screen. So I'm going to try something else and see what happens. Nope, I'm going to share.
We do
Stop
see it.
sharing. Yeah,
Okay.
but I'm not, what's happening is I'm only seeing it on that screen, but I'm not seeing it on the second screen in front of me as I should. And I shared screen 2, but it's not showing up. So let's try this again. You know what? It's not working for me the way it should. But
We
I'm
do
not gonna.
see it though.
Right, you see it, but I'm not seeing it the way I should. Okay, so I'm just going to move on to the next slide. When you are planning to communicate with people, it's a good idea to create a communication action plan. And you probably do this anyway, informally. And it doesn't necessarily have to be in writing, but there are some questions that it's good to ask yourself. And I think you already know this based on everything that you said. Like somebody said earlier, knowing who your audience is, right? I think that's important. Why is it important to understand your audience before you start to communicate? Haven't we heard from Patrick? Patrick D.
Hello, could you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
I feel like with communicating an action plan, it's always good to, like Elton said, have an agenda, so you can like keep to it or like prepare for it beforehand. Otherwise, like when it comes to communicating, if I'm really excited about a topic that I know a lot by heart, I tend to jump ahead of myself and a lot of times not explain it properly to my audience, thinking that, oh, since I know it, everyone else will know it. And that
Gotcha.
isn't the case a lot of times. So it's good to have speak slower sometimes, like take a minute, make sure the audience understands what you're saying them, ask a few questions to keep them engaged also. Because a lot of times, we just throw in information, we overload them with new information and they lose concentration, and that becomes a problem then.
Okay, wonderful. Very, very well said. And I appreciate what you were saying about being passionate about your topic, right? That can happen to any of us when you're passionate about what you're talking about. There's so much information in your head that you can't wait to get it out. And you may forget that, the people who you're talking to may not, follow everything that you've said previously, or they may not be as passionate about the topic as you are, and you're reading the room just to make sure that they're following you. But as you said, having an agenda and being prepared helps to keep you on track. So thank you for that. Okay, knowing what you want the audience to know and what you want them to do is also important, right? Why would you think that that's the case, Jamie?
Knowing I think it's important that they should know what you're trying to convey, and knowing your audience, because you want to know who it is. You want to know what type of information you're basically stating to them.
Mm-hmm.
If you're talking about a topic that you're very passionate about, as Patrick stated, the other person that you're talking to might not feel the same way towards that topic, or they might not understand what it is that you're trying to say. So if you can think about, okay, this is the audience that I have, this is the agenda that I'm creating, and let's say, for example, these are the topics that we're going to be discussing. At least you have a guide now of what it is that you're saying, and then you also understand who it is that that information is being spoken to.
Right, right. Good. Thank you so much for that. And if you know what it is that you want them to know or do, you make sure that you stay focused and get that communicated clearly, right? Before the meeting ends. Okay. How you want them to do it may also, be something that you want to communicate. And what questions do you anticipate? Why is the latter especially important? And that's for anyone to answer. Who haven't we heard from yet? Camille.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Sure. Why is it important for you to anticipate questions that your audience may ask as part of your plan? So you know who they are, you know what you want them to do and all of that stuff, but why is it important to anticipate questions that they may ask you?
I feel like you should anticipate questions because it can help you guide your general communication, so that way you can even try and answer the questions before they have to be asked, or you can try and limit confusion, so that way people don't get stuck on the question that they have to ask, and instead they can follow your answer or what you're saying more clearly.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Very, very well said, because if you anticipate ahead of time, part of your talk can be answering those questions, right? Or if you know you've got a limited amount of time for what you're going to say, you get in there what you know you need to communicate, but if you anticipate the questions in advance, if those questions come up, you're prepared to answer them. So I thank you. Thank you for that. Any other thoughts on this before we move on? Okay, Aaron, yes.
Yeah. I think creating a communication action plan is important, especially in our line of work, construction. We deal with many stakeholders, internal and external. So the way you communicate with everyone will be different. The way you present a problem to or bring a problem up to the contractor may be different than the way you bring it up to an internal department, the track department, signal department, and each has their own function. So you wouldn't want to bring up all the project's problem to say the track department. You want to bring up what's specific to the track department to get that issue sorted and handled. So just once again, knowing your audience, what applies to them, and then how you can answer questions that arise while you're talking with them. Because the things you say to group A, you're not going to say to group B, and vice versa.
Absolutely. An excellent, excellent point. Thank you so much for sharing that, Aaron. And Liz, you look like you want to say something?
No, actually, I was going to tell you that Aaron had his hand up, but I didn't realize it was Aaron who was just speaking.
Yes, yes.
So forgive me.
Yeah, that's okay. No problem. Thank you. Nope, you see, we're looking out for you all and make sure your voices get heard. Okay, so when you are communicating, right, you could be just sharing information, and doing the action plan helps with that. So not only are you thinking about what was in the action plan that I just shared, but all of the other things that your colleagues just mentioned are important, right? So having agenda helps you to stay on topic, right? It holds you to the agenda, and then it also helps people to follow along, and then they'll also hold you to the agenda as well, and hold themselves to the agenda as well. If everybody knows, you've got 30 minutes and you've got 3 things that you need to cover, and people only have 30 minutes, you've got a hard stop at that 30 minutes, everybody's going to make sure that they stay focused as well as you, oops, what did I do? I'm sorry. In sharing information, it's good to encourage input and ask for questions, right? And I think somebody did say that, and we're trying to do that here today to try to make it as interactive as possible. When you're sharing information and you encourage people to ask questions, how can that benefit you as the person who is the one conveying the information?
Can you repeat the question again?
Sure. What's the benefit to you as the person sharing the information, the benefit of encouraging input and questions from your audience? Or do you not see a benefit to that?
I mean,
sorry, go ahead.
No, go on.
Okay, I mean, if you, for instance, at some point, there may be some question that you get from your audience that, and a point of view, not even a question, let's say you get a point of view from your audience that you didn't had thought of it. So it kind of helps you maybe understand your topic differently than what you had previously understood.
Excellent. Thank you. Very, very good point. Appreciate that. Yes, Alex.
Yeah, I was gonna say that if you have a limited amount of time, maybe you can skip through the things that are pretty much self-explanatory or that the audience already knows, and you can focus more on the things that they have problem on understanding.
Right, right. And if you're encouraging them to ask questions, you'll know, right, where the attention needs to be paid. Another excellent point. Thank you. Tenzin, I know you had your hands up. We didn't forget about you. Alex had his hands up first. That's why I went to
no
him, but
worries.
please.
So this kind of reminded me of one time I was talking to my reporting manager, and he told me it's like really good to ask questions with your coworkers because it also exercises their mind, it refreshes their memory about the topic, you know, that you're talking about. Maybe you'll ask them a question, you're like, and they're thinking, oh, I don't remember this too well. That's a good question. So maybe I can look back and get back to you after. So I guess it's really good in a sense that it benefits you to recalling your memory, see how fresh the information is as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if you encourage people, somebody needs to be admitted. And if you encourage people to ask questions, you may find that the people in your audience ask a question that other people in the audience had as well, but just weren't brave enough to ask, right? That's why we always encourage people to please, if you have a question, don't be shy about asking it. You know, one, because we want you to get whatever information you need, but two, you could be helping out a colleague who has the same question, right? Paying attention to body language and facial expressions. I think we talked about that already, but it's real, you know, important to do that because you know when you need to either change things up or paraphrase, you know, or check in with people. And then clarify your message if listeners appear to be confused, right? And as we talked about before, you know, their facial expressions will let you know. Just think back to the picture with those people with the arrows and the blank stares. The question mark, sorry, and the blank stares. Any other thoughts or comments, questions about this slide before we move on?
I wanted to just mention from earlier where it states encourage input and questions. I think that's important because we learn from one another. So, and this kind of ties into what MD was saying, where, you know, maybe it's listening to a point of view, but I think it's important to have that input because we understand if somebody has a question or potentially we do learn something else that may be interesting to the conversation.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The person leading the meeting, or in this case, leading the training, isn't the only one that has good ideas, right? So you definitely want to encourage other people to provide their input. Elton. Thanks, Jamie.
I would like to add about, like, I guess feedback, because input from the audience can serve a valuable feedback. And I guess it can help, like, to gauge the effectiveness of your communication and identify areas of improvement and adapt your approach accordingly.
Ah, okay. Excellent point. Right. learn from each meeting, right? What went well, what could be done differently the next time. No, very, very, very good points, everybody. Thank you so much. Okay, now we're going to talk specifically about nonverbal communication and thinking about how you yourself communicate nonverbally. When you're looking at these pictures, what do you see? Like this first picture here with the thumbs up and the person's hand over her heart, so to speak. What does that convey?
You agreeing with their thoughts, objectives?
Absolutely. And what's showing agreement?
The thumbs up.
Yes, absolutely. And how is the person responding to the thumbs up?
Well, they're appreciating that you're agreeing with their thought, I believe, and
Yes,
just saying, thank you.
Right. It's certainly between the smile on her face, the look in her eyes, and then her hands on her chest shows appreciation for it. Thank you. Jisa, were you going to say something? Because it looks like the light around your box lit up.
No, he already covered it.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. So there's agreement there. Thanks. And how about the second picture? What is her face conveying to you? Anyone?
Confused.
Right. She looks right. She looks confused. Right. And is that a look that we ever want to give off? MD is shaking his head no. Right. But how can you convey to somebody that you may not clearly understand and you need a little bit more clarification without going to the extreme of having that facial expression?
I think you can always ask your presenter that if they can elaborate on what they just mentioned or just clarify that's something that you don't understand.
Right. No, thank you for that, MD. Because how would you feel if you were talking and somebody looked at you that way? Would anybody feel good about that? And no, I wouldn't. May, are you shaking your head? No, you would not feel good. So it's like, you can ask me for clarification, but do you have to look so perplexed? MD, were you getting ready to say something else?
No, you don't want to have your audience look at you all confused. Like, then you're going to be like, you're not doing a good job at that point. You're probably not connecting with your audience. So you just want to be sure that your audience are not confused. If you see somebody with that face, you're probably gonna ask them if they understood what you're trying to, make them understand. And if they have any question, you can definitely just answer it, and so they don't have this face.
Right. Yeah, and it works both ways, right? As the person communicating, you want to be clear so that you don't confuse people. And as the person listening, you also don't want to make the person who's communicating feel badly by, having that look on your face, or just like the animated picture where, the person had a similar look. How about this third picture? What are you seeing conveyed there?
Looks like a very successful business transaction of some sort.
Yes, it certainly does, right? Between them shaking hands and the look on the young lady's face, right?
Looks like a very happy customer.
Yes, who just got offered a job like you all did a few months ago. Okay, I'm going to skip this picture at the bottom, this gentleman, because we're going to talk about this in a moment. With the next slide that I'm going to show you. But how about, whoops, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to do that. How about the people that you see in this picture at the bottom in the middle? What are you seeing there with those images?
They look like they'd rather be somewhere else.
Absolutely. Get me out of here, right? And is that ever how you want to look at work?
Of course not.
Even if you're thinking it, you don't want to show it, right? Okay, how about this third picture at the bottom? What are you seeing there?
Probably is asking you to slow down because you're talking too fast.
Yeah, it looks like that could be what she's saying. Yes. Thank you, Jose. Yeah, any other interpretations?
She looks like she's disturbed, and the other person probably interrupting her between her conversation or something. She
Right.
looks like she's being interrupted.
Right. Yeah, she's either way, she's not happy, right? Right. So you see how there were like two slightly different interpretations of this person's body language, but either is not positive, right? So remember I told you I'm gonna show this other person in the next slide. I'm gonna give you 3 pictures in 3 different scenarios. And once I show you the picture, I want you to tell me what message each of these people could be sending in their body language in the picture. So here's the gentleman again. What are you thinking when you see him looking this way? Let's say he's your manager and he came to your office and he looks like that. What are you thinking?
Probably that you messed up.
You think you're messed up, right? That's the message he's sending you. Okay. Any other?
I'm getting fired.
I'm getting fired. Well, that's really scary, right? Come into my office, I have to talk to you, and that's what you're thinking on the long walk to the manager's office. Jediah, what are you thinking when you see this picture?
I'm thinking like disapproval.
Of some sort, right?
Some sort, yeah.
Okay. Any other reactions to this?
He kind of looks like someone who's already made up his mind and doesn't really want to hear you out, you know?
Ah, okay. Good, Evan, thank you. So with all of these, is none of it's positive, right? What are you seeing that's sending these messages to you?
Like serious looks on his face and also crossing his arms.
Right, absolutely. Absolutely. I would think so too. But what if this is the case? That he's a manager asking an employee to come into his office to discuss a new project, right? So if it's a new project, the person hasn't messed up yet. It's a new project.
He's using very bad communication skills because he's coming off as very aggressive when nothing has even happened yet.
Absolutely. Really, really good point. Have you all ever experienced this before, where somebody's sending you a vibe that makes you not feel like you want to talk to them even before they open their mouth? Have you been on the receiving end of this? No? Okay, if you haven't, that's a good thing. And I won't ask anybody to answer this out loud, but I would say if you're looking at this and you're thinking, oh, you know what? Maybe sometimes I myself may be somebody who sends off the wrong message and the wrong vibe by how I communicate non-verbally. That's something I need to think about for the future. Okay. How about this person? What message could he be sending?
Friendly and welcoming vibes.
Absolutely. You want to talk to him more than you would the first guy, right? Okay. This is an easy one, so I'm just going to tell you that in this case, he's happy about the new project that the manager above him assigned to him. Now, if I just showed you these 2 pictures, you would probably not guess that that's the scenario, would you, based on how each of them is looking? I'm guessing not. How about this third picture? What message are you getting from this person? Quan, what are you seeing when you look at this person looking like this? Are you still with us? Guan Chab? Mhm.
Hello? Hi.
Yes, yeah, we can hear you.
I think they're just kind of explaining a situation that is not, yeah, just explaining a situation.
Okay, all right, very good, thank you. Amaryllis, do you agree with Guan, or are you seeing something differently when you look at that picture? What message is she sending to you?
I also think that she looks like she's explaining something to someone.
Okay.
Yes.
Is it something positive, something not so positive?
She kind of looks like she's reprimanding someone, saying like, you know, to what they've submitted, like, what is this? Like, this isn't acceptable, and like, you know that, and I know that. Like, what's going on?
Ah, okay, all right, good. So that's the vibe that you're getting. So again, two people seeing it one way, and then, you know, Ethan is seeing it differently. So this is the scenario. She's telling her colleague that she cannot help with the project, right? So it could be, I can't help you. This is why I'm just conveying the information. Or, you know, at least this is how I set it up, that that's what she's communicating. But I also see where Ian is coming from, that she could be saying like, you know, this isn't right. Come on, right? Why are you submitting this to me? Can you see that as well?
Yeah, like the way her hands are reprimanding is showing some disapproval.
Right, right. So just, why do you think I'm even showing you these pictures, and why are we doing this exercise as part of this class?
I wanted to say that I tend to be a lot like the first picture. Like, for example, I might be sitting on a very closed body language, where in reality, inside I'm more like the second picture, you know?
Ah, okay. All right.
Yeah, but it's a habit that maybe it's not so effective communication.
So what can you do, just like what we said with Miriam, you know, your authentic self may be more serious looking, but what like minor tweak can you make to send a different message? To send the message that you really want to send when you're communicating with people.
Smile more.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, did somebody say smile more?
Sorry for interrupting, but yeah, I think if you smile more, I think that will definitely send out a different message than what he have right now. He have a serious face, and which is kind of giving a negative representation. Or so I would say if you smile more, then that will definitely give out a different message.
Okay. Are you receiving that, Alex?
Yeah, but smiling a lot can be a double-edged knife, you know, also, because you never know what the other person, if he's like serious or not, or if they're being sarcastic, you know, it's just like a smile, but it's an enigma.
Right.
So you just have to be more open.
Right. I say smile if it's authentic to smile, right? And if the situation calls for it. And then also the fact that your arms are not, you know, you're not sitting there with your arms folded to show close posture like this guy is doing, even though you may not be smiling, your body, your facial expression may not be joyful, but your body language is open. Right, so it's not negative. At least that's not what I'm seeing, and you know, other people can give a thumbs up if they agree. Bryson, I know you've had your hand raised.
I was just gonna agree with Alex. I think people have that same kind of perception about me, but I was gonna say, to answer the kind of question and try to like tackle that, is that there's kind of a study that basically if you think of the word smile, like not necessarily that you want to smile, but if you think of the word, it kind of like brightens up your face. So I don't know, in I guess in like different settings, you could kind of like think about that in the back of your head, because it just kind of like internally just makes your body react to what you're thinking.
I like that.
I know it's like a weird thing.
No, I think it makes sense personally. It's like, you know, they say think positive thoughts, right? Even if you're not feeling great, think positive thoughts. If you're in the middle of, you know, an ice storm, think warm thoughts. That may help. You know, so I don't think it's odd, and I appreciate you sharing that. The one thing I would say to both of you, even though, you know, you may not, you know, be, you know, skipping and smiling all the time, the fact that you are adding your voice to the conversation is a way to show that you are engaged and that you care, right? So if you have a serious face, your arms are folded, and you say nothing at all, you know, when you're in a meeting or in the presence of other people, that whole combination may send a negative vibe. But if you do speak and what you have to say is positive, and you're contributing to the conversation, even though you may not be, you know, one who smiles, I think that sends a positive message to the people that you work with. What are your thoughts on that? Is that just, you know, do you think that makes sense, or do you think I'm just trying to make you feel better?
A little bit of both, but it's appreciated.
Okay, well, it's true. I mean, I don't want to say something if I don't believe it, but I think, you know, when you're thinking about anybody that you're working with, you've got to take the whole person and all of your interactions with them into consideration, and not just look at one piece, because that's not fair. You know, as we acknowledge, like, everybody's style and way of being is different, so we have to recognize that. Okay. So with that said, I'm going to move on to questioning, right? So when you're communicating, you are sharing information, or you are asking or receiving information. And when you're receiving information, you want to make sure that you know, you're clear on what you're getting. And if you are asking people questions to clarify information, you want to be clear on how you were asking your questions. So let's look at this quote by Thomas Kuhn. The answers you get depend on the questions you ask. What do you think when you see that quote? The answers you get depend on the questions you ask. Amy, what is that quote saying to you?
From my interpretation, I would say, based on the way how you communicate your question, if you're not as engaging, or you're just asking a question that's not as relevant as what they were talking about, I feel like they would just replicate the same energy back to you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Really, really good point. Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate that. Any other thoughts, you know, in agreement or differing from, in addition to, not differing, but in addition to what Amy said? Hamza, how about you?
What was it? What was
So
the question?
Yeah, what are you thinking about when you see this quote? The answers you get depend on the questions you ask. What comes to mind for you when you see that?
I think if you ask a question in a positive tone, you might get like a positive response.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you for that. All right. So let's offer some thoughts about how you can make sure that you are asking questions in a way that you know, help you to get the information that you need and the response that you need. Have a plan, right, which we talked about before. think about what it is that you're going to ask and why you're asking and what you hope to get from the person that you're asking those questions of. Keep your questions simple, right? And wait for a response. You know, asking like multiple questions in rapid sensation before the person can ask may cause some confusion. And stay focused. As we talked about earlier, if you're clear on what you want to ask, you're keeping your questions simple, and you're focused and allowing the person to answer, that should help you to get the information that you need. Be non-threatening. What does that mean to you? Be non-threatening when you ask a question.
Maybe like the tone you use while asking the question.
Absolutely. You know, asking questions like, why didn't you do something? Or how could you do something? Even if your tone doesn't come across as threatening, just those questions in and of itself, right, can be threatening to the person. Where we talk about asking permission, that's in the case where you have to ask someone a question about a sensitive topic, right? You want to explain why it is that you're asking, and then ask permission to ask the question so that the person, you know, understands, you know, why it's being asked, and you're showing some sensitivity to them. And then avoiding ambiguity. And what I mean by that is try to make sure that you put as much information into the question as possible so that it elicits a thorough response and not another question about your question. So an example would be, you know, did you read the report? So if I ask you that question, what would you say to me? Would you have an answer for me, or would you have questions before you can answer my question?
I might ask if there was a specific piece of it you'd like to talk about.
Right. Or what report period, right? It depends on how, if that question comes out of nowhere, you may not even know what report I'm talking about. Or to your point, Dan, you may want clarity in terms of what, if there's a particular part of the report that you know, you want more information about. So thank you for that. So when you are asking questions, there are 4 different types of questions that you could ask. Closed questions, right, that respond with a yes or no, or a very brief answer. There are open-ended questions that require more than a one-word answer or a longer response. An example is, what happened at the meeting? What would be the advantage of asking an open-ended question versus a closed-ended question when you're talking to someone?
It offers the person you're asking a question to expand on their experience.
Absolutely. And that's what you want, right? Because you want it to be a conversation more than likely. Okay. And clarifying questions are questions that are used to verify information that you heard from the person. An example would be, did I hear you say, you know, and that's like similar to paraphrasing, right? What a person has said to you. Oops. And then probing questions are used to gather more details and information. Do you find yourself, when you were asking people questions, using each of these? You probably, I'm seeing Joshua shaking his head. Okay. We're gonna do a scenario in the breakout rooms where I'm gonna ask you to kind of think about a combination of questions that you could ask to get more information. So would somebody read the scenario? Anybody? Joshua, it looks like you were the last person to speak, so I'll ask you.
You've been assigned to work on a project. The purpose of the project, why you've been assigned to work on it, and what exactly is expected of you is unclear.
Oh, what happened? Hold on 1 second. I don't know what I just did. Sorry. Is unclear, right? So of course, if you're going to be working on this project, you need to know these things, and there may be other things that you want to know as well before you begin. So I'm going to ask you to use a combination of the various types of questions that we just spoke about to identify specific questions that you would ask. So you could use a combination of closed-ended, open-ended, probing questions, or clarifying questions to make sure that when you talk to your manager, you better understand this project. Okay, I will put you back into the breakout rooms that you were in a few minutes ago, and I will give you 10 minutes, but I'll check in before because you may be able to get it done in less time. Okay, and then I'm going to ask you to identify a spokesperson to speak to the rest of the class about what you discussed. What questions do you have about this before I move you into the breakout rooms? I'm not hearing anything, so it sounds like it's pretty clear. Okay, I will open up those breakout rooms again, and you know what to do to accept the invitation. Oh, Sifin and Nesma, I guess you weren't here when we did the first breakout room, so I'm going to assign you to
No, I was
one
here,
of
but I was under number 128. I wasn't with my name. It was the number.
Okay. What room were you in? Do you remember? Were you in
I remember like the participants, but I don't remember like the name of the room or something.
Okay. So you know what? I'm gonna put you
Robin.
in room 8 because there's only been running on a lot of people there. Was that what you're gonna say, Liz?
I was going to say 11, 10, they each have 3.
Oh,
So
I was on 10 before.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sifin, you're in
Yeah.
10, so I'm gonna
Yeah.
move you into 10.
okay, great. It
All
looks
right.
like everyone
Very
is
good.
joining.
Wonderful.
Evan
Thank you.
Restivo, thank you for joining. Camille Dumit,
Okay.
please join.
Okay.
Alexandros, you need to join, please. Sylvia.
Yeah,
Hold
Pedro looks
on.
like he may have stepped away. Jisa has to be readmitted.
I just admitted her.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. I saw it at the top of my screen. Okay. Do you want to stop recording again
Yes.
for the
Thank
breakout?
you.
All right. So Jisa, are you here with us?
Yes.
I can't do that.
Okay, thank you, Liz. Sorry about that. Okay, so we've got, just for purposes of the recording, because people who aren't able to be here will watch the recording later. So if you asked a question, as was just shared, what's the scope of the project, that's considered an open-ended question. If you ask, is the scope of the project X, and they say yes or no, then that's a close-ended question. Okay. What would be an example of a probing question?
Yeah, our group, when we were talking about the probing questions, we kind of thought of it as like once you kind of understood the project or the scope of the project at this point, it would kind of be like maybe the next steps or like what the process is. So it could be like, oh, now that I understand, the goals of this project, like, do you believe maybe it's like the better approach is, X this way or that way? So kind of now that you have some clarity, the probing questions are kind of like how you're going to get to that next step in the project.
Yes. Yep. Very good. Very good. Thank you. And clarifying questions in this particular case what would be an example?
Example would be like I'm not following. Could you clarify the sequence of, with the procedure that we ought to do with this project, right? Or is there any specific reason why you believe this and that?
Excellent, right. So yeah, the distinction between the probing and the clarifying is if somebody shared information for you and it's not totally clear, you will follow up or maybe even paraphrase to make sure you're understanding correctly, where the clarifying question may be to ask for information that wasn't shared at all, right? To give you more detail. So very good. And I hope that brief exercise was helpful. So I'm going to ask if you're not muted, if you could mute yourself, because we're hearing some background conversations. Thank you so much for that. We are at the home stretch because we've got about 15 minutes left in the class. I'm going to share my screen again. And can you see it's slideshow mode? I think you can, but if you can verify, I'm seeing Kevin shaking his head yes. So thank you for that. So there are two types of listening. The first one is active listening. And I'm going to ask two questions. The first being, does it look like the people in these pictures are actively listening? In your opinion, does it look like the people in these three pictures are actively listening? And if so, what makes you believe that they are?
I think they are because they're keeping a good eye contact.
Absolutely. All of them are, right? What are some other things that you're seeing people doing in these pictures that show active listening?
They're facing towards the person holding the conversation.
Yes. Definitely see that too.
And how they're,
Go ahead, please.
I'm sorry, and how their posture is like, you know, how they like, you know, they're like placing themselves, so you know they can be more concentrating on what the other person says.
Exactly. How about gestures or facial expressions? What are you seeing? Who haven't we heard from yet? Anthony.
Is it okay if you repeat the question? Sorry.
Sure. Well, what are you seeing in terms of hand gestures and facial expressions that convey active listening in these three pictures?
Well, with facial gestures, usually when, someone nods their head or, is more relaxed, it seems that they're approachable to you. They are listening, they're more attentive. With hand gestures, if the person is listening, usually I don't want to see a lot of hand gestures being put out. It shows that they're composed and they're listening. But if a person is showing hand gestures while they're talking, it presents that they're more like engaged with the conversation. So it shows that they're, have an intention to it.
Okay, good. Thank you for that. And you see that in at least the first two pictures, right?
Yep.
Different ways that they are using their hands or facial expressions show that they're engaged. When you think about active listening, if you were to come up with a definition for that, what would you think? Anybody? If you were to describe active listening to someone, what would you say?
Hearing and comprehending the words somebody's speaking to you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Joshua. I think that's important. And here's a definition also that's similar to what Joshua said. Active listening is the practice of preparing to listen, observing what verbal and nonverbal messages are being sent, and then providing appropriate feedback for the sake of showing attentiveness to the message being presented. So there are three components to it, right? Preparing to listen, observing both verbal and nonverbal, and then providing feedback, and nodding one's head is a way to show feedback. There's another kind of listening that I think is conveyed in these pictures as well, and that's empathetic listening. Just based on the name and what you see in these pictures, What does empathetic listening mean to you? Anyone? Jose? Well, hold on. Was somebody going to say something? I was going to
Yeah.
pick on somebody we haven't heard from yet, but go ahead.
Empathetic is like you don't wanna pay attention, but then again, like, you're gonna feel bad if you like, show any signs of you trying to ignore what they're trying to say. So you just force yourself to listen to them.
Okay. And when do you think empathetic listening is important? Denzel, you look like you want to say something.
I wasn't going to, but I'll take a shot at it. I feel like when somebody's I don't want to say going through something, but like somebody that probably wants to express themselves to you and just wants you to listen.
Absolutely, yes. They need empathy at that time. And to MD's point, even if that may not be a good time for you, you're busy, but you can sense, as Denzel said, that the person looks like they need you to listen. You are going to listen empathetically. Liz, you look like you were going to say something.
Yeah, I was going to come back to something MD said, and I think, Robin, you just hit it. There are times where we're, busy, any one of us busy doing things, and we have small windows of time to get things done within, and somebody comes to us. And so, to your point, MD, you may not be ready to listen to somebody, but I think what happens is when you begin to hear a story, a situation, you automatically, I think it just very genuinely puts you in a very different state of mind. And I'll give you an example. I'll give you an example of an employee I had who was going to be meeting with me. We were going to be going over her work. And the meeting was, to get through some stuff. And I was ready to kind of just dig in, right? But when that person showed up at my desk and I could see something was going on, even before she told me what was going on, my whole demeanor changed. And my focus was no longer on the work at hand, but on that person and what they needed at that particular moment. So when we talk about empathetic listening, it's truly, it's authentic. It's that you are trying to be where somebody else is. And if you look at the very first picture, the gentleman facing you, that's an empathetic view. I mean, look at him. He is there. He is present for that person. If you take a look at the face of the female at the very bottom, right? I mean, you can tell she's intent on her listening. So empathetic listening is really just trying to be where that person is at the time and to give them whatever they need in terms of support without any judgment, just kind of opening your heart as well as your head to what's going on at the moment.
Yeah, it can be staged like many different way, like the example you just gave.
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you, Walt, for that. And then here's another definition. Empathetic or empathic listening means being aware of and understanding the speaker's feelings and emotions, as well as the words that they are using, right? It also means consciously trying to understand the meaning of what they are saying, but also what is behind the words and what they are not saying. You're right. And if you can, tap into the emotions, you can get all of that. Okay. Because we've got 8 more minutes left, I'm going to keep this moving and ask you, when you completed the Rate Your Listening Ability survey, raise your hand or give a thumbs up if you did, if you were able to complete that. If you saw it in the email that I sent to you on Monday. If you didn't see it because you missed the reminder email, there was a survey in there. It's not many questions, probably less than 10, if that many, that ask you to respond to some questions, and it gives you a score about your listening ability based on how you responded to the answers. So if you had a score of 20 or above, that means you've got pretty strong listening skills. If your score was 11 to 19, you're in the average range, and you can think about, okay, what is it that you're doing well when you're listening to people and what could you do better? And if you were in the 0 to 10 range, that means that your listening may need a little bit of improvement, and the people around you may think that you do not pay attention to them when they speak. So I'm going to ask you, were there any surprises for you when you got the results of your survey? Manish, you have your hand raised. Lowered
No,
your
it's
hand.
because you told all of us to put our hands up, so yeah.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So you set your hands up for that. So that means you completed the survey.
Yep.
Any surprises or anything that you learned about yourself, anyone, when you got your results, and now that you're seeing what the results mean? And this isn't true confessions. It could be, oh, you know what, I was pleasantly surprised if that was the case. Okay, I don't want to put anyone on the spot, but I would say if as a result of, okay, go ahead, Miriam, you've got the floor.
Yeah, I think my score was in the 20s. I don't remember, but that was a shock to me, to be honest.
Why
In all
was it a
honesty,
shock?
because I disagree.
But you answered the questions. You could always go back and take it again if you do. You disagree because you felt like you weren't honest with yourself when you took the survey?
No, I just feel like the questions are very scenario based. And I feel
Okay.
like it really depends. Like, yeah, obviously in like serious times, I will pay attention. Like if someone needs me, I will pay attention. But a lot of the time people are talking to me, no, there's
You're
nothing
not
going on there.
you're not as strong a listener as you would think. And
No.
to
Like I feel like I have like really bad hearing, so I just also don't hear what someone might be saying. So after the third time of me saying, "Oh, can you repeat yourself?" and I still don't hear it, I'm just like, yeah, I give up.
Okay, yes, so you may have to then figure out what you need to do to make sure that you don't miss, what's being communicated to you, right? Because there may be times where something important is communicated and you don't want to miss it, or if you need to have people put things in writing if it's critical and you're missing it, you can try that. You can try that as well. But one of the things I said to the group this morning that I would say to each of you is practice, right? Your listening skills. Think of it as a muscle that needs to be exercised. And you can practice listening more attentively in your personal life. If you feel like, yeah, you know what, I'm kind of lacking in my listening skills. You're dealing with friends and family every day as well as coworkers. Make sure you practice. And if you have to practice, start practicing at, with the people in your personal life, and then you can check in and ask them if they're noticing a difference. You can do that as well. Okay. Any other thoughts on this before we move on? Because I want to be mindful of the time. Yes, Liz.
No, I was going to just
Remind me of that.
Remind you of the time.
Yeah, I always try to be mindful of that. Thank you. So when it comes to active listening, and just so you know, you do have copies of the slides in the participant guide that was sent in that email that that the listening activity was included in. That was the email reminder from me on Monday. But there are some things that you want to do, some of which we talked about already. Be attentive by, showing eye contact, right? Focus on the speaker, pay attention to nonverbals, ask open-ended questions, probing and clarifying questions, which you practice before, avoiding interrupting, right? Particularly if you're giving the person eye contact, you can tell when they're finished or not. Paraphrasing, to restate, to make sure that you understood. And then at the end of, what was said, you can summarize, and the person will tell you between your paraphrasing and summarizing whether or not you truly listened and followed what they were saying. Okay. The last thing that I wanted to speak about, and I think this is important because you probably do spend a lot of time in meetings, whether it be one-on-one meetings with your manager where you are giving status updates or group meetings. You want to make sure that you are actively participating. So before the meeting, if there's an agenda, which we talked about, you know, sometimes meetings are meeting invites include an agenda, make sure you understand what's planning to be discussed by reviewing the agenda. And then think about what is it that you need to understand as a result of the meeting, right? When you come there, make sure that you leave there understanding everything that you really need to understand, particularly if the meeting is related to a project that you're working on. Anticipating questions that you may be asked, or information that you may be asked to share is also critical, particularly if you are being invited to a meeting that relates to a project that you're working on. More than likely, you may be asked to either give a status update or ask a question. And in order to be prepared for that, anticipate the questions in advance. Has anybody done that? I would hope that that's something that you're doing. Practice active listening. We just talked about that. Share your thoughts, right? Like many of you were doing in this meeting. Don't hesitate to share ideas or ask questions. Let your voices be heard at meetings. You know, you are future leaders in less than 18 months, right? You're going to be first line manager. So I know you've got thoughts and ideas. Don't hesitate to ask them. You know, taking notes is good because it helps you to remember whatever you need to remember after the meeting, or if the person is speaking during the meeting and that's not a good time to ask a question, but you want to make sure you ask that question towards the end of the meeting. If you jot down some quick notes, that'll help you to remember what you want to ask. And then support your teammates, right? Particularly whether in-person meetings, try to avoid side conversations so that the person or people speaking know that you are, you know, paying attention. And then if somebody shares a good idea, you know, offer agreement, okay, to that. So that's some of the things that you want to do when you're participating in meetings. We're at 3:31, so I'm going to wrap this up by just quick takeaways. Be clear about what you want to say. Be aware of communication barriers, be attentive to the nonverbals, all the things that we talked about. Think about questions you need to ask and listen actively in meetings. I'm not going to ask you to share this, but just think about this. What is it that you want to take away from this? I do believe that any training that you attend is an investment in your time, right? You spent 2.5 hours here to get a return on the investment. Think about one thing that you learned in this class that you really want to commit to acting on, you know, after the class is over. So I thank you for a productive discussion. As always, we will ask for feedback. You know what to do with QR codes. You just put your phone up to the screen and the survey will come up on your phone. It's just a few questions. It's anonymous, so you can be honest, and we do appreciate that feedback and your time and your participation. And if anybody has any parting words before you complete the survey, you can feel free to do so now.
I will just say it's a pleasure to see you all. Thank you for being here. We'll look forward to seeing you in October. Quarterly meetings coming up in October. So we'll see you then.
Yes.
Stay well, everyone.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Liz, for your
Thank you.
support today.
Thank you.
Stay
Thank
well,
you.
everybody.
Thanks. Have a good
Thank you
day.
again for everything.
Thank you. Have a good
All
one.
right.
Thank you.
Take
Have a good day.
See
Bye.
you
Thank
soon.
you.
Get home safe.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.